thank you so much for being here today. I'm excited, very excited to talk to you about what you've been doing. I follow you online. You know, I love your videos. I loved what you've done with the Atterbury House sessions, which was just very exciting to me. I was really proud and excited that you would put that together, and because so few people were doing things like that with COVID, which was exactly what needed to be done. What inspired you? You brought great people, the Brentano Quartet, who I love, Augustine Ehrlich, and a few other really great folks. So what inspired you to do that?
Well, I mean, it had a little bit to do with COVID, and the fact that a venue sort of fell into my lap.
Nice.
There was an empty, incredible sort of former ballroom, or it would have been a ballroom in the early 1900s, all mahogany lined, and just an absolutely gorgeous place to play chamber music, basically.
Wow.
And for just 6 months, it was going to be empty. And I figured this out in December, and there was really no way to like rent a great piano for 6 months without it being so exorbitant. You might as well just not do the series. So the series was all without piano, with the exception of Aislinn Noske, who's a Baroque violinist, and her harpsichordist brought his own harpsichord.
Wow.
So we had to be very inventive, and as COVID went on, people started doing a lot of things online. And I thought, you know, I don't want to do that until I do it really well, until like the sound is professional, the camera work is great, and all this kind of stuff. So I did the camera work, and the lighting. And Laura de Rover, who used to be front of house at Jazz Standard, she did all the sound recording. And so therefore, I mean, it really sounded like, you know, Carnegie, a small version of Carnegie Hall or something. Okay, maybe I exaggerate, but no, it sounded great. It looked great. It looked beautiful. I got funding from other people, so people were paid. I mean, it's not like their usual concert fee, but all the musicians were paid, and nobody had to come from very far, so there were no real expenses. Because of COVID, I couldn't sort of look to Europe or the West Coast or Canada or anything like that. The borders were closed. And so everybody that I had on the series is within sort of the tri-state area, like lives in this area. I mean, the furthest I think was Connecticut. Augustine is living there now.
Oh, what a slog.
Well, yeah, like it's, you know, an hour by car or something. And Xavier Foley, the great bass player, he lives in New Jersey, but you know, it's like right across the road. So yeah, and a lot of people, like, they just came from Brooklyn or Queens, Harlem, and so that made it very easy because there were no real expenses to it. So all of the money could go towards the musicians, and basically I kind of fundraised every concert as well. And so once I kind of crunch all the numbers together and stuff, I'm hoping to send, well, I will be sending another check to the musicians with more money.
That's sensational.
But, yeah, I mean, it's not the kind of fees they would have in a normal year, but at the same time, it was a chance to perform. We stayed within the law. So, for example, our first show was Sybarite 5, and there are 5 people. They're a quartet with bass, and me on, you know, doing cameras, and Laura on sound. So we were allowed to have 3 people. So we did. We had an audience of 3 very enthusiastic people. And as it got bigger, and also like some people, there were less, like Xavier was just by himself, Tessa Larkin, Michael Thurber, there were 2. So we would have then an audience of 5, an audience of 6. And of course, as the vaccine got bigger, then the numbers got bigger. Like you were then allowed to have 25 people in an enclosed space and not just 10. And our audiences got bigger. But it was really nice for me to have these people say like, oh, you know, this is the first time I've played in front of anybody for a year. And, you know, to actually hear applause and not just like staring at a screen. So that was really fun. And it was just kind of win-win for everybody, you know. Musicians have made no money all year, and people, philanthropists, wanted to help. And in so doing, they got a great series that they could watch. And also, I wanted to be sure that the series itself was free, that like anybody could watch it, because, you know, everybody's been going through a hard time. So I didn't want to sort of charge tickets or something like that. And I mean, we've gotten some amazing views. It sort of averaged around 7,000 to 10,000 per show.
Yeah.
if you put Facebook and YouTube together. So that was great. And and a bunch of people have said, oh, I've got all these new friends now because of the Facebook thing. I've got 50 friend requests from this, and everybody's so interested. And so that's great.
Well, you always get new fans that way. And I think it's funny that a lot of the older folks in classical still haven't figured that out yet, because it's very hard to get them to appear, online, but they're getting better at it. COVID has taught a lot of lessons. But your lighting was great. And I understand you edit all your videos, right? Not just these, but like all the music videos that you do.
Well, these were live, like 100% live. So
Right.
I was not necessarily editing, I was camera switching.
Uh-huh.
And I think so I had a 4-camera situation on Restream with
So that's live editing, right?
it is live editing, and I think it's very helpful when it's a musician doing it, because I mean, I'm sure you've seen enough TV shows or like, I don't know, PBS specials where the second violin doesn't play for like half an hour, and the
And they're
camera's
on
just looking like just doing nothing.
or the
So,
violas.
I mean, I did make my share of little small mistakes, but only for a millisecond, and then I realized, oh, whoops, over here. So yeah, I tried to have sort of a wide shot, a high shot, and if it were a quartet, close-ups of both sides. If it was a soloist, I tried to get a really nice backlit shot, which was nice. And so and it's taught me so much as well. So I mean, and so doing this, I've now got sort of a new skill set, which is, it's not that easy to come by for somebody like me, because I am terrible at directions and I only learn by doing.
Well, I'm the same way. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm like that too. I didn't know how to do web pages, 20 years ago, but I have learned, and but I thought the intercutting was actually really cool. I enjoyed it, and I thought the lighting was interesting because you put backlighting up that was interesting, and kept it kind of in the mood of the piece.
Well, and I always tried to sort of I mean, people were sort of like, well, are you going to start looking into a crystal ball or something while we're there? Because I was like, do you find that your quartet sort of has a color, like an aura, that it might want to, I started sounding like some sort of yogi or something. But I tried to sort of change it up a little bit for each person, like little tiny details, like the candles were a different color and, little things like that.
Yeah.
And we had a great, our one sort of not classical, well, a lot of people are classical, but they don't play classical necessarily, like Sybarite 5. But this great Venezuelan singer called Nella, she came and did an unplugged with guitar. And she had these 2 guys that she knew, and they're like these decorators, and they do the MoMA thing every year. And they came in with just like all these flowers, and put flowers twining onto the microphone stands. And I mean, it was just, it felt like we were in a jungle when we did that one. It was so beautiful.
It was beautiful. I mean, that was the thing. You didn't know what you were going to get from one to the next. And then the finale, girl, you tore it apart. I was like, okay, there's no filter on Lara today. She's just out there,
Yeah, there wasn't really any filter. Yeah.
It was beautiful. Well, that's a beautiful thing when that happens. A couple of years ago, there was, the newspapers came out with your Me Too story. And it's interesting that just last month, that very dean, Fitzpatrick, passed away. And his obituary from the Philadelphia Inquirer included your story, which I thought was really good of them to do, because with these stoic men of power in the classical music world, they don't often besmirch, quote unquote, their reputation so much. But I was kind of relieved that this writer did. He of course said there were great moments in his life, but this thing really did hang over him. And when I really thought about it, Lara, I had to think about myself, because I was abused very young also. And it changes your life in ways that people don't understand. I mean, you were a musician before this even happened. You'd come up, as a little girl into this world where I'm sure you felt safe and excited, and then had to bury that. And that made me think of my own experience, because I had similar circumstances that I couldn't tell anyone. And it was at that age, I was 14, and and kind of how it changes you and makes you a kind of more resilient person, even though you're suffering, because you develop a thick skin quickly. But I wanted to ask you how it was for you, kind of how it affected you, because that wasn't really covered. Yes, these people, this man, Brodsky, was an animal, and he changed your life. And so I was kind of interested in that aspect of the story, the internal side, if I can ask.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's after the article came out in 2019, I figured, well, there is no longer any time to be meek or secretive about this, because the story is out there now about what happened. And then Cozen O'Connor did a report in 2020 in September of last year. They brought out a thing saying, yep, she was telling the truth. So I don't know why it took Curtis 36 years to muster an apology, but I had to hold their feet to the fire for the entire year. And I don't believe I still don't think they've not made any change, really.
Right.
So, yes, it's true that I'm a lot less worried, certainly with the violin staff, since most of them are now female. So, I'm not that scared of people going to Curtis as I used to be. But yeah, when that sort of thing happens, like when I got into Curtis at 13 and I started going there at 14. Actually, I hardly ever even say the word Curtis. I've been calling it the C word school for so many years.
Really? Wow.
Oh, it's neither nice nor funny, but sometimes you just have to giggle.
Well, you do, because you build these things to protect yourself.
Right. So, I mean, I don't think I'd ever been happier. I was like so excited to go to this school to learn. I would take a score to every orchestra rehearsal. I was the very last second violinist, of course, because I was the youngest, and I had dreams of this, that, the other, becoming, maybe I was actually really interested in both conducting and composing at the time,
Wow.
and played a couple of concerts in Curtis Hall. I remember February of 1986, I played Isaiah's Sixth Sonata at 14 years old, and
Wow.
it went really well and stuff. And then everything went wrong. I mean, things were starting to go wrong. He was starting to do all these sort of weird head games and stuff. Like, it was basically like, oh, wouldn't it be a shame if your brother got kicked out? Because Curtis is a full scholarship school. So you're basically there on probation, and your major teacher has your life in their hands. Like, they could just decide to kick you out at any time. And I remember not like really giving so much of a care for myself, but I just thought, this has nothing to do with my brother. Like, why should he get kicked out because of nothing he's done? Like, and people like this, these predators, and of course he was a serial predator. Um, they are very good at like turning the truth somehow, and so making me feel as though, if I didn't do these things, that it would then be my fault. Um, and then, of course, well, anyway, so the whole thing escalated um, pretty much into the spring of 1986. I was 14, and it eventually turned into rape. Um, only once, because I think after that we had a concert somewhere in Florida, so I got out for like out of Philadelphia for a week or something, and somehow my head cleared, and I realized, I think it was partly, sorry to go into a bit too much detail, but you can cut this out if you want. It was partly that to get a pregnancy test in 1986, it cost me a week's worth of my food money. And also in 1986, I don't know, well, I mean, I suppose some people may know this, but it was like a lab experiment. It was like you had a petri dish here and one here, and you had to do a dropper, and it's not like today where it's like very easy. And And that somehow that just struck me somehow as more unfair than anything else, that I had to spend all my food money on a pregnancy test.
Yeah.
Um, and because I was 14 and I was not experienced in any way, I had no idea you had to wait until you were late, like for that time of the month for a girl. I just didn't know that. And I remember just like reading the thing after I'd done all this thing in a bathroom in a deli of all things. And just bursting into tears. Like I'd never felt lower. Like I just wasted all my money on this. And I didn't even do it right because I had, so I don't know. That was somehow a big turning moment for me. And of course, like, thank goodness it turned out okay. Probably because at the time I was, well, I mean, again, this isn't any time to be shy anymore. Everybody knows everything. But at the time I was 14 and not like regular. So that probably saved that,
Thank
because
God.
yeah, exactly. Um, and so then I went, it was a terrible summer and a terrible start to my second year. And I realized in about October, I can't keep going into these lessons in 1986. Like,
But it took that long. Isn't that funny what we do to ourselves? I mean, it's just like, well, everything's okay, but it's not okay.
well, I mean, and also I didn't feel that there was really anybody I could tell. So at last I confided in two friends. Both of them were actually quoted in the article because they remembered going into this meeting with Dean Fitzpatrick and me. And I mean, nobody really remembered exact words or whatever, not even me, who has a ridiculous memory, but um, all of us remember that he laughed at me when I told him I didn't say the word rape, but I definitely made it clear that I was being sexually abused.
Right.
I talked about, fingers inside me and being forced to do things to his member. And he just laughed. He scoffed, actually, is what my friend Carolyn said. And he said, well, who do you think they're going to believe? Anyone's going to believe? Some kid or somebody who's been with the institution for many years?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I knew he was right? So I knew I had no recourse. So I basically said, well, I just want to change my teacher. I just want to change, nothing else. I won't talk to anyone. And he's like, we don't do that here at Curtis. And so, of course, I mean, I left like devastated. And a couple of days later, the wife of the then director, Mrs. Naomi Grafman, took me out for, well, I was at this point 15, so seltzer water and ice cream at the Barclay Hotel next door, and said, I have such great news for you. Isn't this wonderful? We're going to be able to change your teacher. And so I thought of her as like some sort of savior. And then she was like, but of course, there's no reason to really talk about this to anybody. There's just, you don't need to do that. And of course I agreed. I was like, no, I don't want to. I just don't. Sorry.
Wow.
I can't have lessons anymore with it. I mean, I realized I was spiraling downwards.
Yeah.
And in any case, it wasn't a great year for me. It was terrible, actually.
Right.
And I had to memorize this guy's like schedule and everything so I wouldn't run into him. And I mean, I'm sure it's probably the same for you, but I didn't know the name of whatever cologne or aftershave until a few years later. And I met somebody and then I just had to go immediately vomit. And I found out the name of it. And then I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to ever hang around with anyone who wears this in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Like, it was sort of that bad. So it's really hard for me to be in like a room where he had been.
Yeah.
So I just tried to kind of avoid Curtis as much as possible. And then finally in my third year, I just said, you know what, I'm going to have to leave this place. This has become a toxic place for me. So I left that school. I had just turned 17 years old. I graduated with a diploma. The other teacher they gave me, Arnold Steinhardt was sort of our other major teacher, but he was only there like once every 6 weeks to 2 months. So the basic teacher was this guy. So then they changed me over to some other teacher who had never heard of any of the repertoire I was doing, and I have no idea why that person was teaching there. But it's okay because I ended up having clandestine lessons with Felix Gallimere, with Edward Aldwell. In my last year, once again, I, went to a lot of the master classes and, somehow managed to sort of pick myself up. I thought things were going well, and then somehow just went down again and tried to kill myself, and then sort of got over that. And then
thank God you got over that.
Yeah, I didn't do it very well, obviously, because I'm here. But
well,
it was just severe depression, and of course, this is
yeah.
like 1987. What people don't know what to do with a kid who, and people didn't, like you said, people don't realize what it does to you. Like it puts you on a completely different trajectory.
Right.
And,
it's like that insular trauma, right?
Yeah.
It just kind of, it protects you automatically, but you don't know what's happening. And then I think then the symptom is depression. I mean, I cycled through depression for all of my 20s, trying to be a performer and then being depressed, up and down and up and down. And I, that's why eventually I ended up, stopped singing, because I was like, do I really need to keep doing this to myself, But I was impressed by your resilience, to make yourself into this, fierce and out of the usual cookie mold, violinist. I mean, there's a million violinists, but you stand out to me because you have an extra, chutzpah, right? And which I enjoy. And you compose, and you, and I feel like, I feel like in some ways that resiliency is part of dealing with trauma.
I'm not sure if I agree. One thing that I often think to myself is, it's a slippery slope, obviously, but what would have been, what I was on such an upward trajectory, what would have been had this not happened. And I look at the unfairness of it, like myself having to leave this school. I don't have the kind of, obviously a lot of friendships are made in those formative years of high school, college. I didn't get that chance. And also, I had mental problems just because of what had happened.
Yeah.
And I know that I had a reputation, like at Marlboro and stuff, like as a kind of a wacky weirdo or whatever. And and then you turn it upon yourself, and you start to sort of self-hate.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure that I don't think it creates resilience as much as it just sort of, in me, it created this is never going to happen to me again. So even though, and I think people were able to feel that, like from afar, and even though I crossed paths with other violin teachers who are now well known to be serial predators, nothing more like that ever happened to me.
Wow.
Well, probably because I grew up. I wasn't 14 anymore, so it's a little bit harder to do that kind of thing to someone who's older. Although it is pretty easy in that kind of a position of power. And the problem in the classical music world is that these people, these teachers, these soloists, these singers, these conductors, they're given a godlike status. And in the same way that I think the Catholics sort of perfected it,
Yeah.
they betray the trust of children.
Yeah.
And that means that your parents, every adult in your life has said, you must do everything this person says, whether it be a priest or a violin teacher.
Yeah.
And what choice do you have? You have no experience, you have no idea. Like, it doesn't feel right, but you've been told that this is right, but it just can't be right,
Yeah. Well, and the culture begs it a little bit too, right? I mean, I remember, all my teachers, we all worshiped them, right? And maybe in opera it's a little more magnified, because they're, the egos have to fill, a 3,000 seat auditorium, and so, I feel like singers in some ways are almost, more like that, like the Levines and the Domingos, who have people worshiping them, so they feel like God. So it's almost like, well, I'm in the garden because I'm the God, so I can touch the delights, and it's painful for me because I was caught on the either side of that wall too, but I didn't have the strength that you did. Because with singership, my entire validation rested on whether my teacher thought I was any good or not. My parents weren't involved in my music life, and so I feel like that happens so frequently, knee on a hand, advice, extra voice lessons, extra lessons, stuff like that, and so I feel like it's very easy in our intimate world to be preyed on like that, and I think the Catholic analogy is a good one, because you do care, you give yourself over to a priest, as you would, and so
and they're supposedly even channeling some higher power that you've been told is like fire and brimstone in hell if you don't do what it says. I mean, how these poor Catholic kids, like they're just, for them there was no recourse.
yeah.
I mean, for me, it was, I didn't want my brother getting kicked out of school or me getting kicked out of school. That was my fire, brimstone, and hell.
Mm-hmm.
But
what a psychology to have to deal with, right? At that age,
yeah.
It's way too advanced. You should be thinking about how you're going to be phrasing and breathing as you play, instead of, having in the back of your mind this evil teacher who could gossip and destroy your whole life, and he has all the power. I just, it's awful.
I mean, yeah, to give an idea of the era and the thing, I remember on that one day I was wearing my favorite pair of flowered jeans, which I never wore again.
Of course not. Yeah.
Mm.
Well,
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was remembering in one of our posts, because we would, it's, you have the recordings now of who we know to be famous predators, right? And you had all these people like, that recording is golden, this person's legacy, and kind of the way people deal with these heroes who get away with this, it quote unquote, it makes it almost impossible for that person to get any kind of recognition for what they did. I mean, if you're a predator in a neighborhood, you have to call everyone, right? You have to tell your neighbors that you live there, and so on and so forth. But on a opera recording or an orchestra recording, they're certainly not going to put next to the conductor's name, predator, but maybe there's a solution. I'm not sure,
Well, I mean, in the case of James Levine, first of all, everybody knew about that. It was an open secret.
Like with Domingo, I knew it.
Yeah, but at least Domingo people were like older than 10.
Thank you.
But it's a little bit that, I mean, I'm not maybe I'm not as knowledgeable about opera as you are, but I can't really imagine there being like a recording that wouldn't have been done by somebody else and just as competent, and maybe not, because I mean, one thing Levine did was he kept really good conductors from being at the Met.
That's right.
And like he kept a really tight fist around all of that also. So I mean, I find as though he took away not only the lives of so many young men, but also the possibility of so many young conductors.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't know. I find that I find the betrayal of children unforgivable.
Yeah.
And I was once in a restaurant where he came in on the Upper West Side, and I had to leave. I couldn't look at him. Yeah. So, once again, removing myself from the situation, right? So I had to leave Curtis, and my rapist got to teach there until he died.
Until he died. He died with
until
that.
he died. Yeah.
Mm,
He died happily in his own bed, and he should have died in jail.
yeah.
And if the laws were not positively primeval in Pennsylvania, the dean should have gone to jail also
Yeah. Yeah.
for, uh, well, and he died a couple of weeks ago, and you saw his obituary. So, you
Well, at
know,
least that's why I was glad in some ways to see that it was in his obituary, you know. But even that woman who came to talk you out of it, she should have been, you know, that's complicit too, you know, trying to hush something up like that.
Mrs. Grafman. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But you know, at the time, of course, all this, as you called it, complex psychology, it doesn't occur to you. I saw her as my savior.
Right.
You know, like, oh my God, she got me to another teacher. I'm not going to get kicked out. It's a miracle. I'm not going to be punished for having been raped. Basically, that's what I was saying to myself, but I didn't understand it in that way. And the you know, the extraordinary injustice of it that we now see, and that, thank God, the reporters at the Inquirer and then the Cozen O'Connor report that they then unearthed for everybody, you know, into the sunlight. um, I think it just says so much about the complicity of these institutions.
Do you think, you know, do you think that the PTSD, the trauma of this affected you as a musician? You know, affected your playing, affected how you play and what you hear when you hear music. I mean, it changes you, and I think it does change even the way people perceive things. But I was curious if you had tapped into that phenomenon.
So interestingly, I am going to answer that, but after the article in 2019, a lot of people wrote to me, mostly women, and although not all. And I went to talk to quite a few of them. Like, I actually bought tickets to various places and took my cameras and said, "Is it okay if I press record?" You know. And so eventually that will be a documentary, which I'm going to be working on this whole summer. But
Oh, thank goodness. Oh, brava, brava. I'm glad you're doing that. That's really cool.
but out of these people, uh, out of 7 people I spoke to, only one still plays their instrument.
Mm,
And for some, I was like, you know, how did it happen? One person said, "Oh, I had debilitating back problems," which, you know, I mean, it's probably a psychosomatic. Who knows, you know?
right.
But
Yeah.
somehow they were not able to get past, like, this person made music ugly for them, and so that was the end of it, sort of thing.
Hmm.
And for me, I maybe, I mean, these are all just conjectures, but maybe because I started so young. I was 2, you know, my brother was 3.5 when we began.
Babies,
And music was,
literally.
yeah, babies, yeah. Music was so, it was a language. It was so ingrained in me that that no matter how horrible this man was, he couldn't ruin it, maybe. I
Like
mean,
you'd build up
there's
enough. Yeah.
there's stuff that I learned that year, especially the second year, which I really, and it's so unfair to the pieces of music, but I really can't stand them. But at least it's just those pieces, you know, it's not like the entire art of music or violin playing or whatever. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it definitely affected my life and the way I live my life and everything, but I don't know, would I play music differently if it hadn't happened? It's in the realm of the unknown. But
Yeah.
I think one thing that did happen, which was like, so the best decision I ever made was to graduate from Curtis and take off to the Soviet Union for a year, to the USSR. I wanted to put not just an ocean, but an iron curtain between myself and that stupid school. And I managed to do that. It was the best thing I ever did. I just started there with a clean slate. Nobody knew me. Nobody knew anything about me. And it was like, to this day, I'd say one of the best years of my life.
I love
And
Russian people. Russian people just rule.
some do, yeah.
Well,
Um, and I think that basically made me think, kind of just like, well, why not? You know, like, okay, so I did this. Well, I want to do this. Why not? You know, like, what's stopping me? And like,
Right.
hey, I really want to, go to near Sochi and hang out with the gypsy caravan. Why not? You know, and so ever since then, it's been kind of like, why not? I mean, last year, I'm like, well, there's a COVID happening, and somehow I don't really know very much about Cuban rhythms. So why don't I call up my friend and learn about them, and do them myself with my own feet, so I can march to the beat of my own actual drum. And yeah, why not?
Why
So it's
not?
like always and I think so. In a way, my sort of, not necessarily what happened, but the results of what happened was me going to Russia and then sort of coming back with that attitude of why not?
That's a
Like,
brilliant
why
attitude.
can't I do this?
Yeah. Well, who's stopping me? Why not?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a lot of courage right there. That's a lot of courage. Do you think that there's hope now for some clarity on where the boundaries are between worshiping the musician and worshiping the man or woman?
The person.
Yeah,
Well,
the person.
I think there's hope in this country, definitely. Uh, Although when I was doing research for my documentary, I started noticing a sort of, as I say, the Catholic Church perfected a lot of things, and one of them was predator priest whack-a-mole. So they would have, like, something that happened over here, they'd have a complaint, so they'd just go whoop, and the priest would go over here and then whoop, do the same thing in another parish.
Yeah.
And they have the same thing with predator teachers. In my case, I know mostly about predator violin teachers because people wrote to me about that sort of thing. But Europe definitely plays whack-a-mole with that. I don't know if you know the whole situation with Chetham's in England,
Yeah.
and the whole disaster of Manchester and Royal Northern. And a lot of those people were kicked out of England. So now they happily teach in Madrid and Switzerland. And, it's incredible. And I think that there should be some sort of a worldwide, like, sexual offender thing, especially when it's children.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, I mean, a lot of people have been shot down and are not yet, like, victims and survivors are just not yet ready to be able to come forward. But hopefully, because they spoke to me, at least I can make it visible about who it is that did this.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so and I see no other way of doing that except through film.
Well, that's true, and that's the best medium now anyway, because I don't think that the mass of people very seldom read anymore. So I think you have to
Right.
present a visual to that,
Right.
which is why that's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you too, because you know um, these kindred feelings I have, are vicarious because, I mean, I've only met you a few times, twice. This is the second time, but we've talked online, and I feel a part of your fandom in many ways, but I do, I get a Christmas card. So, holiday
Oh
card.
yeah. Featuring world's cutest Iggy.
That's right. And, so, eh, I wanted to really kind of talk to you about it because I wanted to know how it influenced you as a musician, because it touched me, and I saw other people, these non-musician classical music aficionados, quote unquote, people. I just, I'm glad that they can sit back in their armchairs and stuff, and criticize people for their feelings, but they need to separate the man from, or the person, I should say. Thank you for correcting me on that. From the music,
Oh no, it's always the man. Come on, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly in classical music, I've never heard of a woman abuser. Um, and also but these people are always going to exist. They're called trolls, and they're either sitting in their mother's basement, who's long passed away, or they are insignificant. Like, some of the stuff that came my way after this article was unbelievable.
I bet.
Like, how usually these old, like, old white men, basically, They
Our nemesis. Although I look like one, but I'm a Scottish Mexican. I'm a gay
old
Scottish Mexican.
old straight, usually white men, yeah. And they, I mean, the things that they would say, like, because they couldn't get me on being drunk, obviously, because that's the usual one. Oh, she was asking for it, she had too much to drink.
Hate
um
that.
I was 14 and from a poor family. I didn't even know what a mini skirt was. I mean, I've never been like, you know, I just, there was no way they could get a 14-year-old on that either. Like, oh, she was dressing for it, she's asking for it, you know?
Right.
So they started saying that, like, I wanted publicity. So that's what I was doing. And I'm thinking, like, yeah, guys, like, presenters are really going to want to give me gigs because I was raped as a child. Like, where do these people get off? It's
Right.
unbelievable. And
Well,
like, and some things, like, I mean, there was one, it got taken down, but I think one guy wrote to the Strad actually and said, well, good on him for getting it up at 78. So of course, how do you think that makes me feel? You know, so
right.
that,
But they
it
didn't even
has been,
care.
it has been 2 years of, it's been a personal cost. Yes, a great personal cost. Um, and I was hoping to affect change, which I didn't as much as I would have liked, because Curtis still has a lying bully in charge who lied to me to my face in writing, who lied to his alumni, who lied to the press, and basically has been trying to bully me since 2013. So they decided it would be a great idea just to keep him on, I guess. So there you go. Plus ça change.
The boards, these freaking boards, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really fascinating to me. You know, I'm always perplexed by boards because they have these octogenarians, septuagenarians with values that aren't modern enough for an arts board. I'm sorry. You know, I'm glad they're there, and I'm glad that the developers are willing to take, the development team is willing to take their money. But at the same time, it's like, do you have to really give them an audible voice that keeps things from happening? You know, we had something like that happen here in New Orleans with doing Terrence Blanchard's Champion, where there were members of the board who couldn't stand the idea of an African-American composer doing a full-fledged opera in their opera house. And, you know, the administration tried to blow it up, and there were all these arguments and blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is that values that have no place in the arts were ruling the arts. And I see that all over the country. From the Louisiana Symphony Orchestra, for the first time, has an African-American executive director
Oh
as
yeah,
of this
I saw
week.
that. I saw that. It's great.
It's fantastic, you know, and my
Yeah.
first comment was, great, let's get some more African Americans on the board. Because, you know, the board has to look like the community has to look like the board, you know, in terms of, you know,
And ideally the audience then will look like the community, which is, I mean, inclusivity is what's been missing all these years.
all
And
these years.
yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you've been following the whole thing with Daniel Romaine with the
Yes.
Tulsa opera thing. I mean, and this latest thing, this I'm pretty sure her name wasn't Karen, but we'll just call her Karen, who wrote something saying like, oh, it was so much better concert because he wasn't part of it. And, you know, I mean, it was just, it was such an insulting article to him, and basically to everyone who supported BLM, and basically all people of color, that I actually wrote him. I said, I am so sorry for my white chick demographic right now. Like, I am so ashamed. Like, I mean, I know I'm a Canadian super liberal or whatever, but I can't believe that, I mean, that's my demographic, right?
Yeah.
And it makes me so ashamed when something like that happens, that someone in my, I mean, obviously probably not my position, probably grew up like much more, you know, entitled or something, but I just, how can anyone think that way? How?
Well, that's why I don't even
But then
know.
again, the last 4 years have been like, how can anyone think that way, really?
Well, that's that's why I didn't understand. How did we even arrive at this place where
Yeah.
all of a sudden everyone had been lying for 40 years
Yeah.
about their feelings about each other in the United States? And it's all just been tolerance and courtesy. No one evolved in that time since civil rights.
It seems like they actually really did not. Many people did not.
Yeah.
but many did. And so, I mean, there's only, I mean, with this, with civil rights, with women's rights, with child abuse, there's only one thing to do, and that's keep on fighting.
Keep on fighting.
There's absolutely no other alternative. And I'm sort of an unofficial spokesperson, I guess, but usually the musical guest for a great, they call it a think tank, but it's called Child USA. And they're really fantastic at I actually went to Harrisburg to be part of the protest on the steps of the Capitol. And they're really doing a lot for raising statute of limitations, for people to be able to get justice at last, and for just all sorts of things, helping adult survivors of children, you know, putting together or adult survivors of abuse as children, and putting together like lots of statistics and everything, so it's very clear. And yeah, there's an indefatigable woman at the helm, Marcy Hamilton, and
Wow.
she's just like some sort of angel from on high. So,
Cool.
you know, we'll see. Hopefully, one of these days, it'll be a little bit more than a half-assed apology.
Yeah. Well, and people will start to gain that sensitivity. I have a lot of evangelical acquaintances from high school. You know, I don't throw anybody out in my life. Even though I may distance myself, but I'll actually fight with them, you know, on Bible scripture that they say says this versus this, because there's nothing but love actually in the heart of most humans if they can untap it and get the rhetoric out of their heads from the programming. You know, I mean, that's what just kills me, is just this endless beating of the drum on television.
Yeah,
You know,
despite the last name, I am of a third generation unbaptized, and I actually go by with Chris Hitchens, and I call myself an anti-theist.
an anti-theist.
Not even atheist. It's even more. I hold that all religions are terrible. So
Yeah, well, yeah, and you know, I'm a spiritualist by nature, because I believe in energy and metaphysics and the binding of things that we cannot see because we're connected. You know, the artist Alexander Gray, if you will, and I just, you know, I feel that, you know, I feel that people will come around if you just take the trouble to really talk to them. And I think that's it. We just don't give up with the struggle. We don't let the new generations give up with the struggle, but teach them how to talk and how to get people back to sense, you know.
they're the only hope, really, aren't they? Because at least in our field, in classical music, a lot of that generation is now passing. Of the one that just thought, oh, it's okay to just, like, you know, bang your students.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, I mean, be they children or not, that has just been a completely normal thing. And I believe it still is in a lot of the world, in France, in Italy, Germany, you know, whatever. But
Yeah. Quickly before we end,
sure.
just tell me a little bit about your upcoming album.
Oh, yeah. Well, since I have the venue downstairs, and I have a great sound engineer, and everything is just kind of built in. Also, over the year, I've been learning and sort of investigating and listening to a lot of women composers. So I've decided to do a solo violin album of nothing but women composers. I'm sure it's going to be a bestseller. Not, but it might be, you know, important for in the canon of everything.
I think
And
so.
at least hopefully I can get some more stuff out there and help these people in a way.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So
Well, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. I know this wasn't an easy conversation. I am grateful for you having it with me, because you've actually clarified many things in my own mind. You know, it always helps to talk to a fellow
yeah.
abuse
Always.
person, because it just kind of puts it back where it needs to be, you know, and it's like, oh, that's right. Okay. These things are very important. So thank you. Keep
Well,
on
but
keeping on. Oh,
everybody's experiences are obviously a little bit different, even within this. So
yeah, that's true.
you know, a very smart person once said to me, "You can't compare bads," and in a way, you know, some of the women I spoke to, they were like, "Well, I wasn't as bad. I wasn't as young as you, so it's not as bad." It's like, no, you can't compare bads. Everything affects everybody differently. You know, it's bad, and that's all you need to know. So, but yeah, there is a certain understanding sometimes, I think, talking to someone who's been through it. So
I appreciate it. And just keep on keeping on. I'm looking forward to your album and the documentary. Oh my God, you got to let me know. We can talk about it. I'd love to talk about it. I'm sure you'll get lots of attention for it.
It's going to be summer's work. So
yeah, cool.
yeah, everything else is taking a back seat to that. So we'll see.
Mwah.
Anyway, Joe, so nice to talk to you, and thank you very much
Thank
for everything.
you.
And
Okay.
I'm going to go have some French food with my hubby.
Ah, très bien.
Okay.